They died to make the desert bloom. This is a story about one of the keys to the cosmos. This story is partially told in where we now call the Hoover Dam, or formerly known as Boulder City, sitting on the edge between Nevada and Arizona. Beneath it, places like St. Thomas once lived and thrived with the land before the water came and covered everything. The story stretches beyond a dam, or a town lost underwater. It was part of a network of entry points into this realm, locations now swallowed beneath Lake Mead, hidden under the largest reservoir in America. And what you see here today is just reverse engineering of a parasitic invader. It was once home to a people divinely connected, indigenous star people, children of the Most High, builders of a world carried through knowledge and alignment, authors of knowledge the invaders studied but could never originate, creators of technology that took generations to even begin to understand, let alone replicate. And due to their generosity and the wickedness that consumed the invader, it was taken. Strategic locations. The average being doesn't know a thing about the Hoover Dam. And after all of these years, I finally think I know why. Multi-dimensional stargates, deliberately drowned beneath rising water, sealed off and hidden in plain sight. Entire communities erased from the surface, their presence reduced to pieces, to nothing but stories barely passed down, things that they would never teach you in school. And they label places like this as myth, stories you were never meant to take seriously. Names like Atlantis and Lemuria tossed into the same pile as imagination, while other real locations sat buried in plain sight, rebranded as reservoirs, presented as energy depots, said to serve millions across the country. An indigenous erasure, a forced shift, where what was once spiritual was pressed down into the material. The original function was buried with it, sealed underwater in silence. What you were given in its place was a controlled explanation, something easier to accept and harder to question. They still left pieces behind, just enough for those with an eye to catch it. A psychological ploy, traces sitting right in front of you, without ever being explained. They located the indigenous most sacred cities, tracked them down, followed the lines that tied them together, and went straight for the points that held everything in place, like a nervous system. The flow through the land was cut, and one by one, each site compromised, each connection stripped away, until nothing held it like it once did. And from that collapse, a people once in tune with it all were confined, displaced, and turned into prisoners of war. The dark magi, now holding the world at their fingertips, had already prepared the script, every structure in place, every narrative positioned, and a century later, here we are, following paths that were never truly ours. In front of the beings, rituals took place to complete the sigil, and the sacrifice, tied to the 96 construction workers named in the official narrative, but stretching beyond that number of the millions of lives that were never counted, or even recorded. Everything that once stood there pushed out of the way so something else could take its place. Those winged figures, labeled as the winged figures of the Republic, are presented as guardians, symbols of protection and power, watchers placed at the threshold. Their posture and their gaze, the way they stand over the site, it marks ownership. It's a declaration that what's here is under control and no longer free. Places like the Hoover Dam aren't isolated. They mirror other sites across the world, like CERN and what sits beneath it, the Large Hadron Collider. Different surface story, but the same underlying principle. All access points, locations where something interacts with something more than what's visible. The indigenous knew what these places were. They didn't just stumble on them. They were entrusted with them, passed down, protected, overstood through a relationship with the land that didn't need translation. The elders stood guard over these sites, knowing what was at stake if they fell into the wrong hands. Then came the invasion, and everything shifted. Take a real close look at the framework of the dam. Step back and really look at what you're being told. From 1931 to 1935, out there in the desert, the heat, dust, the basic equipment, and somehow this gets built at the scale that it is. Think about the weight of it, the amount of concrete, how it all had to be placed, set, and held together without failure. Think about the coordination it would take, the timing, the consistency, day after day, and we're supposed to believe that all this came together exactly the way it did, without something else behind it. Just look at it and ask yourself, does the explanation actually line up with what you're seeing? Or does it feel like bullshit? You've got structures sitting beneath all of it, systems layered into the foundation, everything tied together like it was already understood before anyone showed up claiming to build it. From what we know about that era, the tools, the conditions, the limits they were working with. I mean, I get we're not at the height of technology now, like we're being told, but for the official narrative, does that line up with what's in front of you? Does that look like something they just figured out as they went? Or does it look like something they stepped into? Something already there, already operating, waiting to be taken over. Look at the tunneling alone, the way water is pulled through, redirected, pressured, and released exactly where it needs to be. And then you get to the turbines, the engines that keep everything moving, translating motion into output, steady and controlled. That level of integration, all of it working together. It doesn't come from trial and error in a short window of time. It doesn't come from people figuring it out on the fly in harsh conditions with limited tools. It looks like something that was already part of a system, something that already had purpose. It already had a function, and was stepped into, studied, and used. And what comes out of that system gets amplified into electricity, into power, into something you could distribute, measure, sell, and buy. Free energy was replaced, and all the ancestors silenced, so who knew the difference? Some of this technology couldn't even be replicated today. Pieces of it already gone, lost in a previous reset, wiped out by the fire. The magnitude of the structure says more than the plaque ever will. Something that enormous doesn't just hold back water. It sits in the land like a command point, like a part of a larger system that was seized, altered, and forced into a new purpose. It's bigger than public works. It's bigger than jobs. Bigger than the story handed to you. Because the parasites don't create. They study, mimic, and they hijack. They get close enough to living intelligence to copy a fragment, then twist it into something they can use. So this isn't about men inventing something from nothing. This is about a captured mechanism, a seized stargate, understood just enough to be reverse engineered and repurposed. That's why it became multifaceted. Power on the surface, control underneath. Flow regulation, territorial command, energy conversion, a gatekeeper standing where a gateway once existed. And once it was redirected, once what it truly was got sealed beneath layers of concrete, ceremony, and rising water, it was turned into something familiar. Something people could accept without question. Something added into your daily life. Something you rely on without ever tracing it back. To be a consumer. And now it stands there. Isn't what it was. It's what it was turned into. Something taken and made to serve a demon that never created it.